Can you speak loudly for me, and I'll repeat it on the mic.
I have two questions, actually.
Yeah, two questions from a lady in this room. Yes, I'm...
The first one is actually, what do you think of the next parliament? Do you think that it would have the amount of power that legitimately a parliament would have?
Do I think that the next parliament will have the kind of power and legitimacy that a parliament should have? And the second question?
The second one is quite controversial, I guess, but I'm just...
If it's controversial, I'm on my way to the airport. No, go ahead.
I would like to put it forward, and I would need your input on that. Lots of people say that the Arab uprising as a whole is some sort of a Sykes-Picot, a second Sykes-Picot, and...
I read this morning. Some people are saying that the Arab uprising is a sort of second Sykes-Picot.
And in this regard...
the
second half of the question, actually, to what extent do you think that the Western world has an impact on the framework of how the Arabs, or not Arabs, how Egypt is going to...
And to what extent does the Western world have an impact on the Arabs and on Egypt, and what's going to happen?
Yes, exactly.
I can't remember the first part of the question now.
The first question...
Parliament. I don't know the answer to that. I have no idea, because you're all moving into uncharted territories. You've never had a free parliament before. I mean, come back Saad Zaghloul, you know. Although I noticed that Mohammed Mahmoud, the horrible interior minister, was imprisoned by the British with him in Malta. I mean, there's something to think about, isn't it? Look, I don't know what's going to happen. I simply, whoever gets elected is going to take their job seriously. And the moment that the election is finalised with the final rounds in January, the people who are going to Parliament will want to be taken seriously. And so the pressure by them against any military authority that tries to control the state will grow and grow and grow. At which point, people who would not sympathise normally with Salafists or the Ikhwan will find themselves drawn in to support them. In the same way that at the beginning in Tahrir, people of every sect, religion, age, class, job were together, and they were right through to the end. So that will happen, but otherwise I can't go any further than that. As for the second Sykes-Picot, I read an article yesterday or today, and I understand the point that effectively in the West we rather like you all having your revolutions because we control you even more that way. I think the days of Sykes-Picot probably are finished. I really do think so. Every time, I said this in my book, Pity the Nation, every time I have a conversation with a Lebanese, we have to have 3 chairs, one for the man, one or the woman, and one for me, and one for the ma'amara, the plot. And the plot has become part of my life now. It's quite a friendly conspiracy. It's always around some way. It moves around my apartment sometimes. And there are plots. Look at Mossadegh. I mean, it was all real, you see. But it's like the people who say to me, why don't you admit you know that George Bush did 9/11? To which my reply is always the same. George Bush screwed up everything he did in the Middle East. Do you really think he's capable of doing 9/11? Answer is no, right? Look, every Western nation and collections in the European Union will follow what they want. It's the EU who is pushing Turkey as your role model for Egypt, because Turkey might soon come into the European Union if we stop being so racist against Turks in Germany. Maybe it will. But I think that you have to watch this, but you have to do it seriously. And one of the problems of all the Arab countries that are going through this awakening, revolution, rebellion, call it what you like, is that there is a tendency, and I understand it completely, to take your eye off the target and the goal and start looking at other things. The question of foreign, quote, interference, unquote, is something you need to think about every day, and read what people say. Like, for example, the difference between saying, we want Bashar al-Assad to step aside and step down. These people in these various State Departments, foreign ministers, foreign officers, they don't choose words out of their top of their heads. These are carefully thought through. And, I mean, obviously, when you have an army that is receiving $1.3 billion from the United States, that's something you have to ask, well, how is it being spent? What are the terms originally that agreement was made upon? And then, could the army of Egypt, which is your army, can it live without this subsidy? This is another question, because at the moment, one thing we do believe in, we believe if we impose sanctions, we can crush you. I mean, you the Arabs, not you the Egyptians. We thought the sanctions would work in Libya. In the end, we had to use our aeroplanes. very bravely, of course, and we brought lots of democracy, as we know. Look at Gaddafi video. We want sanctions on Syria, we want sanctions on Iran. These sanctions don't actually really achieve their aim, apart from impoverishing the people who live there. I mean, I remember Madeleine Albright was saying, sanctions, it's disgraceful. We've got sanctions on Iraq, and Saddam is still able to build new palaces, which means the sanctions weren't working. There were sanctions against nationalist Spain and Republican Spain during the Spanish Civil War in 1936. They didn't work. The Republicans lost. The good guys lost and the bad guys won. So we're very keen on sanctions. Now in South Africa, up to a point, it worked. But if you read the memoirs of the very unpleasant racist gentleman that ran South Africa, it's the fact that they realized that numerically they were running out of time. That black South Africa was going to get so big they couldn't keep controlling it. So I'm very dubious about the sanctions thing. But I'm also even more dubious about the generosity of the West, especially when I don't know how many euros I've got in my pocket at the moment, though I'm not in the Eurozone in Britain, especially when we're not terribly well off at the moment, and yet we're still able to give these huge amounts of money. Watch the IMF. Next time an IMF delegation arrives in Cairo, it's more important than Tahrir. Read everything they say and try and find out what the agreements really are with the IMF, because they are the biggest impoverishers in the world, particularly in Africa, and you are in Africa, even if you don't always believe it.
I was wondering what your take is on the protests in Tahrir, and if you think they should continue or not.
Lord Cromer is dead. I cannot tell you that. You have to decide this. There's lots and lots of journalists I can give you, telephone numbers for. They'll tell you, but I'm not going to. I'm waiting to see. I'm going to report what happens. I'll comment on what happens, but I think Egyptians are going to decide whether the protests continue in Tahrir, not Englishmen, excuse me. I'm not criticising you, I'm just saying, I have the same problem in Ireland when I go on RTE, Irish radio television. What do you think Ireland should do? I say, come on, you've been occupied by us for 800 years. I'm not going to tell you what to do. It's over. You've got independence for 26 counties out of 32 now. So I don't know whether Tahrir will carry on. I can see all kinds of reasons why it should, but Egyptians are going to work them out. I'm not going to say.
I think you're encouraging words that the Arab region is listening less to the Americans and to the Israelis. But my question is, will they start to be more attentive to the Palestinian cause?
That's what you call a good question. The question was, for those who didn't hear it, that I mentioned that I thought that Arabs were, rightly, in my view, paying less attention to what America and Israel is saying, but will they pay more attention to the Palestinian cause? Well, they should.
Yes, and in particular Egypt, obviously we have not seen much movement, for example, from the Rafah border.
Which border?
Rafah.
Oh, the Rafah border, yeah. And particularly Egypt, he continues, where we have not seen much movement on the Rafah border.
And just more sympathy towards self-determination.
And just more sympathy towards self-determination. Look, if the Arab world spent as much time discussing the Palestinians as they're currently discussing Syria, the Palestinians would have more hope. I know the old cliches, the Palestinians will let Egyptians die to the last Egyptian for Palestine. That's all rubbish. The problem is, you see, that you're dealing with this Israeli-American, I'm trying to think of the right word to put it, osmotic relationship. Some years ago, when Clinton was enjoying, shall we say, his presidency, I got a whole list of statements from Madeleine Albright, mixed them up. I think Shimon Peres was probably foreign minister at the time, I can't remember, and mixed them all up together and went to a good friend of mine and said, sort them out. And she said, well, it's either Israeli or American. I said, it's both. There's no difference. Unless you can find a way of establishing a critical reality for Americans in what their relationship to Israel really means, you can burn your life out helping the Palestinians and it won't do any good. The key is the relationship, particularly the military, financial relationship between Washington and Tel Aviv, or Jerusalem if you're an Israeli, the unified eternal capital, etc., etc. And I don't know what you do about that. I lecture a lot in the United States, and I get thousands of people I'm much, much bigger than here. And I start by attacking the Likud lobby, as I call it, not the Israeli lobby, it's Likud. And I used to get people coming in shouting, waving Israeli flags, and I attacked anyone who suggested I was going to lie or that I was anti-Semitic, which of course is the old, forgive me, the material that comes out of the rear end of a bull. It's the bullshit language of intimidation. And I do these lectures specifically to show Americans you can tell the truth about the Palestinians and the sky will not fall on you. You know. I should add, and this is a small hopeful note, that more than half the lectures I give in the United States are organised by Jewish Americans, obviously liberal Jewish Americans who support the Palestinians, but nonetheless, it's a fact. Unless you can somehow deal with that critical problem, I don't know how you can help the Palestinians. I mean, look at Obama, quite apart from his grovelling before Netanyahu, when he says 67 borders and goes all mute and dog-like in front of Netanyahu. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a fact that Obama believes that his second presidency is more important than the entire Palestinian people. And as long as that is the case, you can do what you want in Egypt, and it won't do much good. One of the great problems is that when it comes to Palestine, it will be pushed to one side. I have to say that I did watch Obama here in Cairo when he came. And there were a few critical problems even then. Everyone was in love with Obama for saying, you know, we've made mistakes, we've done terrible things. He was talking about Mossadegh and so on. But there was one critical moment when he referred to the Palestinians as relocating in 1948. Like they got up in the morning and said, oh, let's go to the beach in Gaza today. Or how about we could go to Bashara and go skiing in Lebanon. And then suddenly they found themselves stuck there. You know, why did he accept the Nobel Peace Prize when he'd done nothing? Vain man, you know? I mean, he should have said, look, it's a great honour, but I'm not worthy of it, I haven't done enough. But he took it. And then he made a speech in which he said, even more critically, I'm not Gandhi. I have to live in the real world. As if Gandhi didn't have to fight the British Empire. Is there not still in America a possibility that someone with some kind of Jeffersonian ethics could say, look, I may lose my next presidency, but I've got to say that justice demands that I say the Palestinians must have a homeland and the settlements must end. Even if America catches political fire, why not? Then you'd go down in history. You won't go down in history of the second presidency like the first one. Voice wearing out, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much for coming up. You're welcome. Yes, so let me put the podium here. Right, yes, go ahead. Everyone? Which one? The first one. The first one. Who's it for? K-A-R-W. That's Kaf Al me, right?
But without F, it's Kafri.
Oh, it's Kafri, okay,
Yeah.
well I'll do it this way.
Oh, excellent. Very good. Your handwriting's better than mine.
I found a lot of Arab handwriting very difficult to, I'm not going to do it on Tahara, but I'll screw it up.
Oh, okay. This is good. Ah, excellent. Can you do the numbers? Because I said you would. Thank you very much.
Hi.